How do we know we're growing in holiness? Because it has absolutely nothing to do with how much you serve at church or how much you read your Bible or how many people have converted since you've talked to them. In fact, we're very rarely told what to actually look for when we're trying to grow in holiness as sure signs that we're going down the right road. So that's what I'm going to be talking about in this video. Hi, my name is Rita Taylor, and I help Catholics better understand their psychology and the impact that it has on their moral life so that they can finally get strategic and get to living that life of joy and freedom that they really want. Let's get really clear on what exactly it means to grow in a life of holiness and how on earth we're supposed to measure or know whether or not we're actually doing the right thing. God has made it very, very clear. You can judge a tree by its fruits. More often than not, I hear Catholics constantly talking about this checklist of what it means to be holy, and it has to do with how much they've served at church or how much they've evangelized or how many people have experienced conversions and how many people they've led to Christ or how many people they've convinced of some kind of a moral argument. Now, all of those things are really, really good, but all of those things are highly dependent on what God is actually calling you to do in your everyday life. And that's going to look different for everybody. So they're not true and accurate measures of whether or not you're growing in holiness. But the fruits of the Spirit, this is what God has very clearly told us is to be expected of anyone who's growing in holiness. So let's take a look at what these fruits are. We've got love, joy, peace, patience, long-suffering, which we usually just call as resilience, because I know long-suffering does not sound like something lovely. Then we've got kindness, meekness, faithfulness, generosity. We've got modesty, constancy, and chastity. So there's 12 fruits in total that you can experience, and you're not going to experience all of them all at once. They all have their individual time and place that they're going to pop out. So today's video is really going to be talking about how do we recognize the fruits. So each of them are individual and each of them are going to look a little bit different in your life, but they all have something in common. So there are two things in particular that every single one of those fruits have in common, and they're the two characteristics that define what a fruit of the Spirit is. So each and every single one of them has to check these two little requirements before they can be considered fruits of the Spirit. And the easiest way to learn what those two things are is to actually just look at the word fruit. Why do we call them fruits in the first place? So the first reason is really simple. We call them fruits because fruit are delicious. Just think about what it's like to bite into a nice, fresh, juicy peach. Delicious, sweet. It kind of drips all over your face. There's a lot of delight that you experience when you're biting into a delicious fruit. So the fruits of the Spirit are marked with delight, except it's not a physical sensory delight, it's a spiritual delight. It's your soul that's experiencing the delight. And so it's much, much greater than the delight you experience from eating ice cream or eating even a real fruit here on earth. And it's a delight that lasts much longer than the delight we experience by sensory pleasures. Now, the second way that we recognize fruits, or that second characteristic that all the fruits have in common, is a little bit less happy for most people. Let's just take a look at fruits again. Now, if I gave you an apple seed and I told you, go plant this apple seed because I want an apple tree and I want to be able to eat apples, how long would it take before I could eat those apples? It would take a couple of years before that seed took root and actually grew into a tree and started to produce apples. And not only would it take time, it would take intentionality. I would have to really care for that tree, especially in those first years while it's growing, because that's when it's the most vulnerable. And it's the same thing with the fruits of the Spirit. If we want to experience the fruits of the Spirit in our lives, it's going to take time and it's going to take intentionality. So the fruits of the Spirit are the end result of a virtuous life. So just like fruits are the last thing to show up on a fruit tree, fruits of the Spirit are the last thing to show up in a life of virtue. Now, that doesn't mean that you're only going to experience them right at the end of your life. You can experience them for a long time, just like an apple tree can last many, many years, and you can have many, many harvests with it. The same thing is true for the fruits of the Spirit. You can start experiencing little bits and pieces of those fruits as your life progresses. And as you grow in holiness, you will start to have more and more abundance of harvests. So think about this. Every single saint, this is what they had in common. They all experienced the fruits of the Spirit. So even though their holiness was so unique to who they were and to what their vocation and mission was here on earth, this is what their common traits were. They all experienced the fruits of the Spirit. They experienced a great level of charity. They were joyful. They were peaceful. They experienced the ability to be extremely patient in the face of evils. They were able to suffer well and even suffer with joy. They were kind and generous, faithful and meek. They were modest. They lived chaste lives, and they were constant. They had constancy and temperance. And this is the mark of a saint. These are the only true telltale signs that you are in fact growing in holiness. So when all of these 12 characteristics become delightful, right? So when you're sitting in traffic and maybe you're stuck because there's an accident in front of you and it's going to take another 30 minutes for you to get home, or maybe you're stuck behind a train, are you joyful? Are you experiencing delight in having to sit there in your car and be patient? Or is it a little hard? Is it a little bit frustrating? Do you get a little bit angry? That's the telltale signs we're looking for, is that no matter what is happening around us, no matter what is happening in our external circumstances, we are able to experience these fruits. We are able to experience a peace and a joy and a fruitfulness. We're able to be charitable and kind and generous, no matter what is happening around us. That's what it means to be holy. So let's take those to-do lists of whatever it means to be a saint that we've got in our heads, whether that means being this crazy missionary that goes and talks to 10,000 people, or whether that means having to be a cloistered nun or a priest. Let's just take that all down, because those are vocational. Those are going to be different according to your vocation, to your mission, to your state in life. But the fruits of the Spirit, those are the constant. Those every single one of us, every single Christian that is called to be holy and called to become a saint is going to experience the fruits of the Spirit. This is God's promise that we are going to eat the fruits of our labor, something we can look forward to. But this is what we need to keep our eyes on. And this is how we can check in to see whether or not we are in fact growing in virtue. So now that you know how to recognize fruits in general, let's talk about when you're going to experience certain fruits. Because like I mentioned earlier, not every fruit is going to show up at the same time. There's different external circumstances that are going to bring about different fruits. So that's what my next video is going to be all about. We're going to be talking about the 3 different categories of fruits that we experience from the Spirit. So I'll see you in my next video. God bless.